All right, so I've got my lid that I had made previously for my lantern, and it's nice and leather hard, still somewhat flexible, but definitely like just leather hard. I've slipped and scored this attachment, so make sure that you've slipped and scored. And then I'm going to make a latch so that it stays on my lantern without sliding off unnecessarily. So I'm going to start off with a piece of clay and I'm going to roll a coil out. So to do this, I started off with just a chunk of clay. And I just moved my hands back and forth, but you can also start by squishing it in your palm until it forms kind of a long form. And then I'm just gonna roll it back and forth slowly. Don't do it too quickly. If you do it really quickly, you're gonna lose control of it. But you can also just like kind of gently pinch to get yourself started. But I'm just rolling back and forth. Okay, nicely. You wanna start off with good clay. I just felt an air pocket in there, so I'm gonna use the other piece that I had. So I'm just rolling back and forth. If you get to a spot where it starts flopping on your table because it's flatter on one side than the other, just gently squish it until it's round again. If there are any dents or anything like that, you can smooth them over before you keep rolling. Okay, so I'm gonna make this coil and then I'm gonna slap it on my table to flatten one side. Okay, so I did that on purpose. And now I'm gonna do the opposite side. So I just kind of flattened that out. And now I'm gonna square it off. And then the last one, squared it off. Okay, and I'm gonna just coax this to make it longer. So I'm kind of making a slabbish coil right now. You could keep it round if you liked the way that that looked. That would work just fine. So I'm just giving it a half turn each time here and giving it a little smack on the table. All right, so I think that this should probably be large enough, just guessing, for what I'm gonna need. Yeah, so what I wanna do is pull my lantern back into the seam here. And this is actually gonna be fitting down inside of here. So I'm gonna pinch off my extra that I definitely don't need. And let's take a measurement. So I'm gonna see what the inside of this measures at tightly. So that's a tight fit right now. And then I'm gonna loosen up on it a bit so that it has some room for what you would call play. So let me see about just gently sticking this. So I've now got a little bit of space where this can jiggle around in every direction, and that's gonna be perfect. So I want there to be like a pencil thickness of wiggle room on all of the sides. Okay, so now I've got my ring. And then I've got my lid, and what I'm gonna do is I can take a paintbrush or my finger, get some slip, and just douse the top edge. And then what you'll do, trying to keep it centered, so I'm putting my fingers underneath and I'm kind of using them to guide, having kind of an equidistant drop here. And then it just picked it up. And I'm eyeballing it, and I want to make sure that that's as close to being in the middle as possible. And then I'm gonna just trace out, just using a tool, where that is. Could you measure this if you were a very precise person? Yes, you could. Am I that person? I am not. Okay, so then I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna slip and score this. So I'm gonna slip and score my edge here. And if you have one of these rake tools, these are truly wonderful for slipping and scoring. If you don't, you can just use whatever sharp tool you've got. I'll show it using the less good tool just so you can see how scratched up this needs to get. Where you're transitioning from like the one side to the other side of this fold, You really want to get in there. Okay, so I've done it once around. Now I'm going to apply some more slip, because messing up the structure of the clay, the way that the platelets are fitting together, is the point of slipping and scoring. So I'm going to try to go in a different direction around this way. So I don't want my marks to be directly on top of the ones I just made. I want them to make a crisscross zigzag situation so that I am messing up the order of my platelets. Okay, so that's almost there. I'm going to apply slip one more time. And I'm going to go ahead and use my rake tool because it's just a lot faster. All right, so that really looks very roughed up, very wet, and that's going to be good. Okay, so I'm setting that aside. Now I'm going to slip and score the two ends. Okay, and I want to really rough those up and make it to be a good connection. So I'm going to stick those together. Okay, so those are together now. Just kind of work them together a little bit, push them together. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and slip and score this part. So usually you want to go around making score marks in a multitude of different directions. They shouldn't all go one way. And it should really get, like, this is looking real gross. And I always say it should look like raw hamburger. If it looks like raw hamburger, you're in business. Okay, and give it one last little score. Really, really gross. Okay. And then I'm gonna take this lid latch that I've made and wipe off your area if it's gotten really gross. And you can just take that latch that you've created. Don't make the break happen at the same point that this break happens. It'll increase its strength. Okay, so I'm just positioning it there, and then I'm gonna just, without distorting my piece here, because I don't wanna mash it on the table, I'm gonna just gently apply pressure going around. So I'm just pushing my finger down a little bit and just making like a bunch of little movements here where I'm just pressing those wet spots. All right, and once you've pressed all of those on, you're actually gonna take your little sponge and just run it around to make that smooth. And you can take a little slightly dampened paintbrush also and just kit inside and clean up your details. Make sure that there are no little rough parts showing and that everything looks smooth and feels smooth to the touch, because this is a lid, so it'll be picked up and put down. You can also come around and smooth inside here as long as it's not too fragile. Okay, and before you commit to that lid, you're gonna wanna make sure that it fits on the body of your piece. You don't wanna put the weight on it if this is not yet leather hard. Don't let it sit there for a long time, because it will just make it wanna fall apart. Okay, but here we go. So it looks good. Got our little lantern. And that's ready to be smoothed up once everything is nice and leather hard. For storage purposes, keep your lid set aside. So you could put that on its own board or its own plate, and put them both in a plastic bag if you're not going to immediately be able to smooth them, or if they're not leather hard right away. Okay.